my name is Susan Kaye Quinn, as Kim told you, and I am so excited for tonight because my absolute favorite thing in the world is to write, and my second favorite thing in the world is to talk about writing. So, and this is such a perfect size group for this because it's not too big, and there's enough of you to have a wide range of ideas and good questions. So, first I'm going to hand some stuff out, then I'm going to query you, and then we'll get started. Okay? So, who doesn't have a bookmark? Anyone? I think I got most people already. Good. I'm going to go ahead and hand out. I don't have overheads, okay, which I normally would have, but I've got like a book that I wrote for you guys. So, you can take your notes on that if you would like. And I also brought along some books. I am self-published. So I wanted, sometimes people don't know much about self-publishing, so I wanted to bring some books along. You can kind of see what self-published books look like. They look like the books that are all on the shelves over here. And I'm going to pass some of these around. I have a penname, which has the sexy man cover ones, and I have a young adult science fiction under my normal name, so I'll pass that around as well. And...
Well, I don't know. And you know what?
Anybody not get one?
And if you leave the extras over here, that way if someone comes, I can, you know,
Perfect.
hand it one and not interrupt your presentation.
All right, does anybody need one that doesn't have one? Latecomers. Excellent. In fact, you know what? I'm going to deputize Kim here to make sure everybody gets one of these and one of the handouts. All right, so we're going to go through the handout. And gee, I guess I should probably have one of those, so I know what I'm talking about. And while I tend to ramble on extensively, I want you guys to ask questions as we go, because this is all about you, okay? This is so, because I know how to do this already, for the most part. I'm still learning every day. But this is all about you guys, and I want you guys to come out of here and just be energized and jazzed to go home and write. So ask your questions as we go along the way so you can get that information right when you need it. And I brought some books along not only to show, but to hand out. These are some novellas, little tiny books. I'm going to pass them around too. So whoever asks a good question might get a book. If you ask a bad question, it's like to the adult section for you. There are no bad questions. Please do not feel afraid to ask whatever you want to ask. All right, let us begin. Oh, Lord, I'm going to have to wear my glasses like a librarian to be able to do this. I'm sorry. Okay, this first page is just to give you some handy links and information. Like I said, I'm self-published. I run a group called For Love or Money on Facebook. And there's 700 plus people in the group now. Great resource for information. So if you're just writing, not published yet, you can definitely get writing information there, but lots of publishing information, all kinds of great stuff. It's a support group. It's an information group. And I'm Sheriff Sue, so I run it to make sure that everyone stays in line and is super nice. And they are. It's a fantastic group. Also, this whole worksheet will be, or packet, will be online. There's a link for that here. So if you want to get a fresh copy, if you want to forward it to your friends, if you want to do whatever, please share. Please share. As I was saying, we went to dinner earlier, and they're like, you could like keep this information private, and then you could go and speak at all these places, and they would like pay you. And I'm like, I would pay them for me to not have to go. I love speaking. I absolutely love it, but I love writing more, right? Writing is first, talking about writing is second. So I don't spend a lot of time doing this, even though I love it, because I am so committed to getting my writing goals reached. I also have a pretty extensive website with all kinds of information for writers. Do check that out. And if you are interested in self-publishing, you can join my mailing list and get a little quick start guide to give you just the basics, to give you an idea what self-publishing is. Those 3 books on the front are my 3 main series. And then I have the description that was sent out that hopefully is what drew you in to tonight. And you'll see I've underlined some phrases. So I'm going to read those phrases, just the phrases real quick. Structure is the backbone of any good story. A trilogy, a 5-part series, a 9-episode serial. I've done so many different things, which makes me somewhat uniquely, I guess, qualified to give this talk tonight, because I've done like all this stuff, and now I get to share it with you, so I'm excited about that. We're going to talk about the essential structure of a story, one story, and then how to expand that to a larger storytelling network, or framework, rather. So longer serials, series of short stories, the whole thing. And if you look at that paragraph, you can see that there's a good chunk of underlying stuff. When you're going to write your blurb, whether it's to query an agent or to self-publish your own novel, you want to have a lot of that in your description. It's like power words that say, this is what you're going to get out of coming here tonight, or out of reading your story. So it's sort of like a little mini example of how you would do it. Lots more stuff about that kind of stuff in my books. These are my any published books. All right, if you turn the page, you will see my books. There's the SKQ books, and in the next page, it's my pen name. She writes sexy romances. And
Susan Kaye Quinn would never do that.
Oh, yes, she would. Oh, yes, she would. In fact, she did, but on one of my series. So why do I write? Let's tackle the pen name thing first. I self-published, wrote a bunch of these books under Susan Kaye Quinn, and was making a living, full-time writer, doing great. Why in the world would I go and get a pen name and write a bunch of other books? Well, first of all, this name is top secret. So none of you tell anyone. All right?
Okay.
When you go online to share this packet, that is stripped out of there. Okay? Because I don't really want anyone to know. It's not because I'm embarrassed. I love those stories. Love those stories. However, it's a marketing thing. Even J.D. Robb. Who reads J.D. Robb? Do you know her other pen name? Nora Roberts. Okay. Why would Nora Roberts, this hugely famous author, why would she have a pen name? It's for marketing. I want to have two different marketing focuses, and I don't want the streams to cross. Now, pen name is really popular. She sells a lot of books, and she would swamp the heck out of Susan Kaye Quinn if they started crossing their also bots on Amazon. Okay? So for the health of Susan Kaye Quinn, we want to keep this separate, so they cater to their own audiences. So that's what that's about. Why did I start in the first place? I honestly was just curious to see what the whole pen name thing was. Like, could I do that? Could I write sexy romance? What would be like? People were making money at it, so I'm like, outstanding. Let's give that a whirl. That's out, right?
And I heard too, like with pen names, like if you, for example, had a couple. Now I'm talking as a traditionally published author. Had a couple of books that maybe weren't great sellers. And so, like, the next publisher might not be willing, like, hell, that Kim Brunner, she, didn't, like, so they might not want to take a chance. So
that's a fresh start.
Right, a fresh start,
Absolutely.
and you, like, maybe those when you're kind of your practice books, and now you're going to do something else. So I've heard that that's also another strategy. Or if you write picture books, for example, an adult, you maybe don't want people to say, oh, I want that person when they don't, that's a completely different market. So.
It's a completely different market, and I think that's a very valid thing. So another thing I want to do out of all this creative stuff we're going to do tonight is get you to think a little bit outside your box. You have a box. I don't know what it is, but you do. And I want you to like stretch a little bit and think maybe I could do that thing that I've been afraid of. I'm a huge fan of doing the thing you're afraid of. So go after that thing. So let's talk, I have all these covers on here for a reason. I wanted you to take a look at the structure of these stories. So I'll just go through them real quick. So Mindjack, my first trilogy, has a trilogy, has a bunch of novellas, has a second trilogy, little dash boxes, are the ones I'm going to write in the future. And you'll see the little arrow between The Locksmith and The Telepath Chronicles. That's because that is a novella that I wrote that was also in an anthology. Another way for me to reach another market, is to join with other authors, put out an anthology, and it reaches new readers. Okay, Debt Collector is this wild-haired thing that I decided to do, where I have 2 seasons out of 5, the other 3 haven't been written yet, 9 episodes each, and you'll see the little dash lines in between, so it's like 3, 3, 3. That's because there's really written in sets of 3 stories, even though each season follows one debt collector. So it's like if you take all 9 of them together, it's like a book. It's a long book, but it kind of has 3 acts to it. And we'll talk more about that one. Royals of Dharia is standard trilogy, 3 books. It was very boring on that one. Singularity, the one I'm currently working on. That 3rd book, you guys are the first ones to see the cover, except for Liz, because that one's not out yet. Hopefully it'll be out next month sometime.
Which one?
The Illusory Prophet, the 3rd book in the Singularity Trilogy. I'm still working on it.
It looks a lot better in color.
It does. It looks outstanding in color. It doesn't do it justice. So that has 5 books in the series and a prequel that I've been planning from the beginning, and a whole bunch of novellas, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of anthologies that those books are also in. And this is something I planned creatively from the beginning when I first thought of the Singularity series. It's a boy who wants to be a machine. Okay? And I'm very much a science fiction fan, and way back in the day, Asimov, when he was writing a lot of his robot stories, he did it over a series of short stories in magazines. And through that, he sort of collectively wrote them all in the same universe, and they each explored like a little aspect of the universe. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And so I wanted to replicate that sort of as an homage to Asimov when I'm writing my robot stories. So that's sort of the origin of those novellas. Okay, so let's look at pen name. Now,
So you know, right, when you're starting, you already say like, oh, I'm gonna do 9, or are you like, as you start to get more into it, then you know?
it depends.
Okay.
It depends. Now I know exactly what I'm doing. Then, not at all.
Okay.
It's particularly for that 9-episode serial. What the hell was I thinking? I don't know. But it worked out. And that was definitely a discovery process. And in the end, it worked out. It was perfect for that form. Serials are very fast-paced. You think about cliffhangers and action, and you've got 5 chapters to tell an entire story. You know, you have to be really economical with your words. It's incredibly liberating and yet demanding to write those stories. And I was putting them out every 2 weeks, so it was like insanely fast. And it was just an adventure. So when I do it the next time, the next seasons, I'm like, no, we'll be writing all of those ahead of time, and then we'll be releasing them 1 a week until they're exhausted. Okay, so Susan Kaye Quinn, let's back up a moment. My Facebook group with all the writers, it's called For Love or Money, which is the title of my book on indie publishing. I write some books for love, and I write some books for money. All right, Susan Kaye Quinn is my For Love books. And they're kind of all over the place because I go where my heart tells me to go. Pen name is my For Money books. So she is a marketing demon. She is totally right down the line of what the market wants. Okay? Tailored to the market, designed, and purposefully done. So, what does she have? She's got, her first 2 ones were serials as well. 6 episodes apiece, 6 episodes wide, because that's what the market wanted. And the pricing worked out. Completely driven by what the market desired. And then I made my story fit. Okay? So at that time, serials were big when I was writing. These were like 2 years ago now. Since then, the market shifted. These are shifter romances. It's a very hot subgenre right now. And the market shifted to being more fully contained stories, shorter stories, like 50,000 words instead of the top 2 are like 125,000 words total over the 6 serial episodes. The market wanted shorter, happy ending, complete romance. Boom, done. More of a traditional romance, actually. So that's what.
How do you know what the market wants? How are you following?
Excellent question. You get a book. Do you want sexy or
No sexy.
no sexy? All right.
Give her Eli.
Give me. Yeah. You love Eli as much as I do. Okay. How do you know what the market wants? Such a good question. I get this asked like 10 times a day in my group. All right. It's not a mystery, actually, because you go on Amazon and you look on the bestseller list and the top 20 books, there's what the market wants. It's right there. You can see the page numbers. You can see the pricing. You can see the covers. You can read inside and read the whole book if you want. You can just read the first chapter and get an idea of what the tropes are and the flavor of it. You can even see the ranking to see exactly how much the market wants that book. Some of them, if you go like, there's like a top 100 for any, say for penname, her top 100 in shifter paranormal romance. It's a category, down to the tree, okay? So the number one book in this category is probably selling somewhere in the top 100 on Amazon of all books. That's probably moving 500 books a day, something like that. It varies day to day. Number 100 on that list is still selling in the top couple thousand, maybe 1,500, which means it's still moving at least 100 books a day, something like that. Other categories might start at, 10 books a day, and at the bottom it might be like less than 1 book a day. So depending on your category, I had some books that were in steampunk for a while. That category didn't sell anything. I was number 1 in that category all the time. But it didn't matter because there was nobody looking for those books. And right now, I've got actually 2 books, I think, in the top 100 of this category today. And then I have another one that's in the top 20 free books in this category on all of Amazon. So she's very competitive. She's selling a lot of books. But that's hard to do. It's a very competitive category, so I have to work super hard to get up there and be able to rank that well.
Now, do you mean self-published and traditional all combined, or is
Yes.
this a separate category?
No, they're all combined. So, and actually in this category, there are very few traditionally published books. It's almost all self-published books because the traditional publishers can't keep up.
So that's what you actually do when you decide you're gonna do a new project, you go and you look and you say, whatever's selling on Amazon. I haven't done that before. I think I'll try to get into that market.
Yeah.
You do as well.
Yes, and if you are serious about doing that, I recommend you read my book For Love or Money because it talks step by step about how to do that, how to identify your market, how to identify what you want to write. Shifter romance may not be your gig. There are certain flavors of contemporary romance that you could not pay me to write, right? I just really don't like abusive relationships. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere near that. These are more traditional romance, loving, strong people. I'm like, yes, I can do that. Okay.
One more question about that. So you know that the shifter romance is really hot, but how long does it stay hot? How quickly do you put the book out after you decide that? I mean, is it a year, 2 years, 6 months, 1 month?
That's a good question. Should I give you a book? Do you want a
You know
book?
what? I have some of your books, so I feel like I'm still in.
No, you're not stealing my books. I'm going to give you one anyway. Because that way I'll make you read it.
Is that the first one?
This is the
I read
first
that
one. You did?
Yes.
Okay.
I loved it.
There you go. All right. What was your question?
So you look on Amazon and you see a certain, like, shifter romance is popular.
Yes. How long does it
do you
stay
get
hot?
Yeah.
Okay. Who likes to read young adult? How long have you liked to read young adult? Forever. Right?
Okay.
You're always going to write young adult for a long time at least. So in some ways, it's perpetual. How long has Hunger Games been around?
10 years.
A while. You can still write a Hunger Games book today and it will be popular. Dystopian, it just keeps going and going and going. My very first indie book, Open Minds, which I think I passed around here somewhere, that was the one that I queried and got rejected, and I eventually pulled it back from publishers because I decided to self-publish. And they were like, oh, paranormal is dead. Can't sell this. I'm like, yeah, watch me. So I pulled it back. In the time that it took me to format, edit, send it out querying reviewers, got a bunch of reviews, launched the book. On the launch day, one of the agents called me back. She's like, oh, I'm going to start reading your manuscript today. I'm like, you can buy it on Amazon. So, and it was selling really good. Because I knew, I could look at the charts and I knew those books were selling and those people were high. They didn't think it was selling. What they were thinking was that 2 years from now it wouldn't be selling. And that's part of their pipeline and that's what they have to go on. You don't have to do that in self-publishing. You can move as
And I
fast
don't
as
think
you
of
want.
even just changing like what you call it. Like it could be the same exact book, but like I know chick lit, oh god, that's horrible. But if you call it women's romance, oh, that's acceptable. But chick lit is like, oh no, we don't want, so it's weird how you.
And it's
people
weird
can-
how people have this idea that chick lit is, oh, horrible, but you go to the market, so don't believe what anybody says. Believe what you see numbers on the charts. Because people are like, oh no, vampires. I never read those. Has fun. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about craft books that you can use as a resource. These 4 are the ones that I most highly recommend. I use the concepts in these books every day when I'm writing, and if you only had to get one, of course I would recommend Save the Cat, because that goes over structure of your entire novel. But just as importantly, James Scott Bell's book Write Your Novel from the Middle is so key, so fundamental, because having that pivot point in the middle of your novel nailed down emotionally for your character is really helpful, and it keeps your story balanced. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But all 4 of these books are fantastic. I highly, highly recommend that you add them to your schedule or to your library of craft books. All right, I have several other books that I would also recommend. Writing for Love by Andrea Sokoloff is great for romance. A couple of these are style books. Practicing Mind, I highly recommend for you to learn how to develop good practice of getting into the flow state if you're battling procrastination or anything like that. That will actually give you some really good tools. So all of these are great. Check them out. Okay, let's talk about structure. The power of 3. 3 is an incredibly resonant number in mythology. Think about the Trinity, the 3 fates. A lot of powerfully mythological things come in sets of 3. It's a fairy tale number. And the reason that resonates with us so much is because stories come in 3 acts. And the 3 acts are really not like a structure to bind you. It's just really how our brains process the idea of story, the concept of story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that structure is so wired into our neurology that we really are receptive or receive stories best when they're in a 3-act structure. Now, one way you can look at the 3-act structure is in terms of actual 3 acts. But by 3 acts, I really mean 4, because I have, if you see in this graph, there's a pivot point in the middle, and the midpoint is so important that I actually divide that second act into 2 parts, Act 2A and Act 2B. And that pivot point in the middle is the point at which your character changes who they are, or they have some kind of mirror moment, a reckoning where they decide, am I this kind of person or am I that kind of person? Am I the kind of person who lets the bad guy go, or am I the person who muscles up and becomes the hero? And so that midpoint is so critical for your character that Act 2 really can be divided into all the stuff leading up to it and all the stuff coming out of that resolution. Now, your character doesn't always fully change in that moment. That moment is really the recognition point. It's the point where I call it the mirror moment, because it's the point they look in the mirror and they decide who they are. Now, becoming that person is a whole second half of your novel, okay? And they're not likely to actually fully realize their potential until they get to the end of the novel. So they have time to get there, but that midpoint is that critical point of realization where circumstances have forced them to come to that realization. So another way to look at the 3 acts is thesis, antithesis, and fusion. Now, thesis is sort of like the original setup of your story. This is the world as it is. The girl who's in the bad job and she needs a new boyfriend, but she hasn't been able to break away from him yet. You sort of state the thesis statement of your story. Then antithesis is she goes through that break into two point where she comes to some commitment or realization she has to break up with that guy, and that launches her off into the rest of the story. Okay, so that rest of the story the meat of it is in Antithesis World, which is sort of a funhouse mirror world of the original version of the world. So now she gets on a cruise and she leaves the boyfriend and she's like, that's it, I'm going off into the world and doing all the adventures that I never did before. Everything is upside down, everything is different from her normal world. So that's the Antithesis World. And then when we come to the crisis part of the story, the climax, we get into this fusion land, which is where we have the original world comes back into collision with this new special world, this antithesis world, and the two elements fuse together to provide her with all the tools that she needs to really solve her problem. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about how you would put that over not just a single novel, but a whole series. Because we're usually familiar, at least intuitively, with the 3-act structure for a single story. It has the beginning, the middle, and the end. But when you try to extend that out to a series, it gets a little more complicated, and it depends on basically how many parts you have in your series, what you're trying to accomplish with it. So I have some examples here of 3 different stories. There's Mindjack-Singularity and DC is Debt Collector. And I show kind of how they're spread out over that 3-act structure, but now spanning the entire series. So looking at Mindjack, the whole first book actually happens as an Act 1 book. I'm going to spoil my stories for you a little bit so that you can understand how this works. So in the first Mindjack book, Kira is a girl in a world of mind readers, but she doesn't read minds. It turns out that she is a mindjacker, and she gets into this hidden world of mindjackers. But by the end of the story, she actually comes out and reveals the entire Mindjack world to the normal world. And so that Act 1, where we sort of set up the story, and by the time you get to that break in 2 where you're making some kind of commitment into a whole new world, that's what happens through that entire novel. Then in the second Mindjack book, we have all the Act 2 kinds of things. And right in the middle, you'll see that the middle of the second Mindjack book is actually in the midpoint of the series. And Kira does have a big mirror moment right there in the middle of that book. And it lines up because the whole series sort of pivots around that central discovery point of her character. And then when we get to the third Mindjack book, it's all Act 3. What is Act 3? It's conflict and climax and run till the end. And that whole third book is really like that. It is one long race to the end. Now, within each of those books, I still have another 3-act structure nestled in there in each book. So each book is a self-contained 3-act structure, but it also has a 3-act structure over the series. Singularity is a little different because it's got 5 books in it. So in the first book, we have the same thing as with Mindjack, where the whole thing is just basically set up. Even though there's a whole novel there, it's really setting up to get to the second book. And as I mentioned before, I'm just now writing the third book, or working on the third book, hopefully releasing it soon. And dead center in the middle of that book, I knew was going to have to be the big midpoint for this entire 5-book series. And so there's a big realization. And in fact, the entire third book in that series is really a giant midpoint. It's like the whole book is about the character Eli's realization of, is he this kind of person or is he that kind of person? And so keeping that structure in mind can really guide you as you're plotting out all the minutia of all your different books, if you have that sort of overarching idea. Debt Collector is, again, a 9-episode serial, which seems kind of crazy, but really, when I said before, it was in 3 sets of 3. It's like those 3 episodes each fit within a act.
And so I knew when I was writing it that by the end of the third episode, I had to get to a break into two kind of moment for my character. And that in that fifth book, which was right dead in the middle of the series, I had to get to some really big mirror moment, which he does go through, and so on. So having that larger meta structure in my mind helped me, even though I was writing like crazy fast and whipping out stories, and pantsing my way along a lot of that, because I had that larger structure in my mind, it was easy to stay on the rails and not get lost.
I end up not having to do a lot of editing because I know where my story's going before I write it. It took me a long time to get there, so don't feel like, oh my god, I'm just totally pantsing my way through this, I have no idea what's happening. This will help you know what's happening a little bit better. So even if you don't actually plot it out, like write it down, this is what happened, just having this structure in your mind will guide your little pantsing self on the right path. Okay, so Act 1. The gun isn't there to kill your character, just to motivate them to change. The gun is your plot. The character starts out here. She goes to that mirror moment. She's got to decide who she is. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm staying here, because why would I do that? She's got a gun to her head that's going to make her make that choice. Then she chooses to be something else. So your whole plot is serving to make her make that choice. Why the middle point is so. Okay, so 2 links here, one for a Hunger Games analysis. I literally go beat by beat through the Hunger Games and break it down for you. Way more information than you probably ever wanted to see, but there it is. Emotional structure is the equivalent for that in that emotional sense where I was talking about going from the old you to the new you. I plotted that out as an emotional structure as well. So links for you to look at later. But what happens in Act 1? Call to action, also called the inciting incident, also called the catalyst. People have all kinds of different names for it, but it's basically that thing that gets your character off their rump and challenges them. You've got this thing you must go do. No, I don't want to do it. You must go do it. No, I don't want to do it. 3 times. No. Magic power of 3, right? No. Okay. All right, so the setup is getting you to the point where you get to that call to action. Her day's going bad, things are going worse, she got fired, and then she comes home and her boyfriend is cheating on her. Okay, call to action. What are you going to do? Well, maybe we can make it work. Then we enter the debate phase. Maybe he's not so bad. Maybe it's just one time. I'm using romance examples because they're easy, all right, to pull it. So she's still in her normal world. She's debating back and forth. Do I leave him? Do I not leave him? Emotionally, she has habits that she uses to avoid pain. She goes to Starbucks, she gets her latte, she gets her ice cream out, she's calling her friend, oh, you won't believe what happened. Alright, but the plot keeps that from working. The Starbucks is out of her favorite flavor, her friend is on vacation in Tahiti. She keeps trying, just patch it so I can get back to my normal life. And then when she gets to the break into 2, where we're going into that second act, it is clear that none of that shit is going to work, and she's got to make a decision to leave him, which she does. That commitment to leaving is a threshold that she passes over. She can't use her defenses anymore. She is in uncharted territory. She's decided to go on a cruise that's only for single women, and we're just going to see what happens, right? Okay, so she passes through that threshold, and there's a beautiful concept in screenwriting about imagery. And one of the things that I love, and I have the books on here that I recommended are screenwriting books. Imagery, the threshold is a rebirth. It's a new you. You know, it's a small new you. The big new you is coming later. Going through a tunnel, going underwater and coming back up, going over a bridge. These are all sort of symbolic visual senses, images of going from one state to another state. In my Singularity book, I have him literally getting on a bullet train that goes underground. He goes down, and he's like, the forces of gravity is like pushing all the blood to his head. He's like, oh God! And then he like arrives. There's like super drama moment. So make your character earn it. They're gonna commit, make them earn it. give him some rite of passage, even if it's a subtle thing, crossing that gangplank to get on the boat, there's no going back because the gangplank is being pulled away, right? She's committed. She's doing this thing. Okay. So let's see, in the Legacy Human, just to give you an example of what that looks like, and also because we are, okay, so I talked before about how you've got an act 1 that's in one book, and then you'll have 2 more acts in your book, or you can have a whole book that fits inside act 1. So my first Singularity book, the whole book fits inside this act 1. So what does that look like? Well, he's got the first, second, and third acts within his larger 1-act structure. His larger 1-act structure is he starts out thinking ascenders are great. They're the human-robot hybrids. The whole book is a debate section where he's like, humans, robots, I like them, but I can't decide. Finally gets to the end of the book and he has to commit to the human side because everything's blown up and it's a disaster. Right? So you can see that structure in the book, but there's also the 3 acts that have to be in every book. So the act 1 in that one is his normal world before he goes through the screaming tunnel. Right? He's in Seattle, he's got his normal world. Now he's going to the Olympics, the Creative Olympics. So he goes through the screaming tunnel, and now he's in this bizarre world where he's competing against all these other artists. And he's in that world for the whole second act. Then he gets to the third act, the rebels come out, everything goes to hell, and now he's fighting. Okay, so that's the fusion that he has his friends from home, has his new friends from the Olympics, and there's these other people in there, and so they all get together. It's the fusion that makes the third act happen. So we've got both of those going on in the same book. I need a drink.
Real quickly, I had heard once, like, and I wasn't sure if it's so organic, but like literally, like, so like it was like the quarter mark, like, so if your book was 200 pages, then like the act 1, this thing should be exactly around 50, and then 100. Like, I mean, do you actually even look at that, or that just happens spontaneously for you, or do you like?
It happens spontaneously for me now, but when I was first really nailing down structure, I was a Nazi about that. I'm like, I'm making it come in at 25%. God bless it. Because that forces you to be economical and not ramble on in the first act, which is what I tend to do. Okay, so yes, stick to that 25, get your midpoint. Do not put the midpoint anywhere except at 50%. It needs to be at 50% because it's like a teeter-totter, and if you put it at 75%, you're going to be like, okay? It needs to be at 50%.
Or people start to see you have a slump, or like there was a slow part, and they don't know why.
They don't know why.
Because, and I didn't know why someone said something about one of my books, and I'm like, wait, what part are they saying? And it could just even be a matter of like, but I think my thing was like off by 8 pages or something, so they're probably just thinking like, oh, get to that, and you didn't even, I didn't even realize it was like 8 pages off, but like.
Right,
yeah.
It's an emotional thing where we need to feel it. We need to feel it happen at that midpoint, so get relief. And then we can go for the rest of the book, because now we're strapped in.
Yeah, I can attest, having read,
I can't hear you.
having read like over 1,000 books in the last few years. If you put your midpoint too late, everything after that feels rushed and convenient in the plot. And so then it's like, oh wow, you go down too fast as a reader.
It's lopsided.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So pay attention to those markers. Now, I will say, having written like a ton of books, I don't adhere to it as sharply anymore. I pay more attention to my internal rhythm because I know the story rhythm so well. I'm like, yeah, the midpoint's coming late, but really this midpoint is like a 4-chapter midpoint. He's really had to wrap up to it and come down from it. So where exactly we're nailing that in the middle doesn't really matter. We're given all the feels. So
I have a question actually, because I know most of the books of yours that I've read are single point of view, and if for people who maybe write dual point of view books, or I don't know if the other ones I have read are dual.
penname. Those books are dual point of view.
You struggle with getting the midpoint right for both
It
leading
is tough.
characters, right?
It is tough. You have to duplicate this for both POVs. So you've got to hit those markers pretty close, which means at the end of his chapter, he hits his midpoint, and at the beginning of her chapter, she hits her midpoint, or something close to that. You know, get it in there somehow. And otherwise, again, it feels lopsided. And but dual midpoints are great because you can actually see, even though you're in one viewpoint, doesn't mean you're not seeing the other viewpoint go through their midpoint, right? I usually have them both have a moment, right, where they confess. For penname, it's different in the other books. And some of those I do have. Do I have alternating POVs? No, I don't. Not in those. The one I didn't publish, I did. But anyway, you can see it. You can see him struggling with his decision. You know the character well enough. You don't have to be in the POV to see it. So, you know, use your craft, but make it happen. Make the feels be there. That's the most important thing. Okay, so let's talk about Act 2. A and B are midpoint, dead in the middle. So what does that first half look like? These labels I have, B-Story, Fun and Games, Promise of the Premise, Allies and Enemies, those are Save the Cat terms. Please, please, please read Save the Cat. It is so structurally important to your story. B-Story means the love story, if your love story is not your major focus. Fun and Games means we're playing around with stuff. All right, Promise of the Premise is you came into this story saying we're having robots and humans. Where are the robots? The robots got to show up. All right, Allies and Enemies. We have lots of interaction. Your main character is here, but he's interacting with all these guys. Some of them are good, some are bad, and they elucidate your character. Until he gets to his midpoint, and then he's like, who am I? And after that, the bad guys close in. There's all his last moment. There's a dark night of the soul where everything just goes to shit. Until we get to the break to 3, where we're so desperate, we come up with a new plan. Okay, so what's emotionally happening during that time? You kind of know it already, right? Because we're going through that midpoint. Before the midpoint, we're trying to get back to normal still. After the midpoint, we're like, oh, just give up on that. I've got to try to, give up my lattes. And you stumble through it, and then that all is lost dark moment usually has a leap of faith for the internal emotional part of the character. They're like, okay, I don't think this is going to work. It's never worked before in my life, but I've got to try it now. Because there's no other choice, and everything is just completely hosed. And so when they go through that leap of faith, that gives them their new plan. You tie the internal and the external together, and you've got a really solid, compelling Act 2. Act 2 is the heart of your story. Act 2 is the story, okay? Act 1 is the lead into the story. Act 3 is like, run, chase scene, big climax, done, okay? Act 2 is the heart of your story. So you've got to get all the stuff in there that people came to your story to read. It's also the antithesis funhouse mirror section of the book, which is so great because you get to do so many fun things with that. You set up your character who's this boy who wants to be a machine, and now, what is he? He's got to be this totally amazing human. Well, that's not what he wanted at all. Everything's upside down. And now the robots are lying to him. What is that? They're supposed to be gods. So everything goes upside down, topsy-turvy. And there's a lot of grist for your story in that. Okay, how does that work for the series? Okay, so for my Singularity series, that's books 2, 3, and 4. I have 3 books in that one section. So in book 2, I actually do have the B story. That's where he's going after his love interest. They have fun games. They have more of the allies and enemies are formed. Book 3, like I said, the whole book is his mirror moment. And then book 4 is just going to be depressing as hell, and I'm sorry. But it will get better, because we will get to the new plan eventually. All right, so let's go to, oh my god, I don't have Act 3 in mine. Do you guys have Act 3?
It looks like this if you need one.
Oh, thank God.
You can borrow it as long as you get back.
All right, so Act 3. We start with that new plan. We've got a great idea, right, that we're going to do. And these stages are, again, Save the Cat stages. Actually, Save the Cat Strikes Back, the second book, has more of this, where you gather up the team, you get ready to storm the castle. There's something wrong, there's some high tower surprise. You have to dig down deep to figure out who you really are. Climax, and then you're done. So emotionally, the new you that you came up with in that mirror moment half a book ago, right? And you've been struggling and struggling, you're just getting worse at it. Like things are just not going. You thought you were going to be like the new you, and you are totally not, and you're failing and failing until you get to that dig down deep moment, and that's where you succeed. And that's why the mirror point is so important, because it's setting up the payoff at the end of your book, where you're going to be like triumph. Okay?
But not succeeding until after the climax. I mean, like usually that's.
Wherever works for you emotionally. I usually have like some really god awful choice that they have to make at the climax. And that can be their dig down deep moment. Sometimes it can come before, because they've got to dig down deep because they know it's coming. And then when they get there, they've got to, last minute, now they've got to make this horrible choice, but it's okay, because we already did our dig down deep and we know that we're up to that task.
Somebody told me once the way they keep the action going is they love their heroine, they keep doing some terrible things to her. And it works if you really stop being nice to them and just challenge
Just the
them.
worst thing you can do
Yeah.
is be nice to your heroes.
Yeah.
Put them through hell.
Yeah.
The gun, right?
Yeah.
The plot is the gun. That is not a nice, cuddly thing. Okay? It's a gun, and you're gonna make them change. And they, I mean, like, think about it. It's real life. All stories are analogies for real life.
I've seen this expressed a couple of times, more or less with the metaphor that you throw your character up and you put your character, send your character up a tree and then just start throwing water.
Throw rocks at them. Yep, absolutely. And is life like that? Right? You get up a tree and then it gets worse. Right? It's like that, and so that resonates with you because you're like, yeah, life does that, and I want to see that character persevere, and I want to see them succeed and improve. And do we all change? I mean, how often do we go on diets and not diet? How often do we pledge to do something better and don't do it? You know, I don't have an actual gun to my head. If I did, I probably would be more successful in the things that I want to do. One of the reasons I'm successful at writing is because I love it and I'm addicted to it. Nobody's holding a gun to my head for that one. So, okay.
Another question.
Yes.
How often do you feel like you plan out these getting middle ends or midpoints and these breaks, and then as you're writing it, you realize, oh my god, I have a better idea, or oh my god, this doesn't work with what I have planned for later, I like it better, or it just doesn't jive?
Constantly, all the time, all of that.
So you're always changing this then?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I don't change the fundamentals, usually.
Okay.
Usually, but only because I've written like a ton of books. Alright? It's really okay however you do it. It's totally fine however you do it. It just might mean you need to do more iterations, gotta do more editing, right, to get to the final form. But don't feel like, oh well, I can't get it done in one shot, I'm a loser. You know, no. It just means you have a deeper, complicated story and you're working it out in your head, and that's like fabulous. You're probably gonna come up with something amazing. So keep at it. I was just writing a chapter today where I like do this where I hyper plot out my chapters ahead of time sometimes because I do dictation, because I have like my notes and my headset on and I'm walking around the house and I'm like acting out the story, and I got to the beginning of this chapter today and I'm like, oh no, we're totally not doing that. We're doing this other thing and this is how it's gonna start and this is great. You know?
Then do you have to go back and change everything else that's along that you've already planned out?
I don't usually come up with something that's radical like that, but if I do, like actually that happened yesterday. Went through, wrote the chapter. One of my characters came up with a seriously lame excuse for why he was doing the thing, or he couldn't do it because of this lame excuse. I'm like, hey, we gotta change that. I'm like, had to go back, change that whole thing, and it didn't radically change anything. It changed the rest of that chapter, but it didn't propagate, so I was kind of lucky in that regard. But next week I'm going to sit down with 5 critique partners and my professional editor, and they're like mountain of notes. And I'm like, oh god, I'm going to have to change a lot of things. So, you know, it's fine. As long as you get to the end and you're happy with that product, that's all you need. You don't have to have a perfect process.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I used to get stuck in going back and editing everything right then. But now I do this right as if. I just continue writing where I'm at. As if I make those changes.
Yeah, put a comment in your, insert comment, go back and fix so-and-so. This story I sent out completely dropped one of the characters halfway through the story. Bye-bye! Never see that guy again. He's a critical part of the story until he shows up in the final scene and they're like, where did he come from?
Yeah, he's stuck in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah, just like, that guy, whatever, we don't care about him. So, yeah, you're going to have stuff. So, and I literally had someone tell me that, and I just went in and put a note, make sure you put him back in there at some point. So, everything can be fixed. Ain't no thing. I didn't miss seeing the next page again. I don't know how I did this to myself. Thank you. Okay.
Take the other one back.
Oh, wait, Daryl.
Wait,
Oh,
here's the next one. Let's trade so I can write notes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so we've gone through the whole story, beginning, middle, and end. All right, we got brainstorming next, so we're done with the official chunky part of the plot thing. Does anybody have any other questions before I go forward?
But when you're coming up with the writing, you mentioned walking around the house. Is it a mix of things like you sit at the desk and just kind of force yourself to it, or does it come easier if you just go out for a walk, or what's the best way that you found?
Such a great question. I'm getting you a new book. have you read this one?
Not that one, no.
All right.
Thank you.
One thing I do a lot is study my own process. You don't get to writing 500,000 words in a year unless you know your own process. You know how your brain works and how you can get it to generate that much story, basically, in that amount of time. So I track, first of all, I track every day, my word count, but also my mood, and why I'm working on something or why I'm not working on something. Like today I'm like, working on the presentation today, no worry, 238 words, woo! So, I track relentlessly. I track when I'm dictating to see, when I dictate, it's very rough draft. And so I have to go back and edit. Does that just add time, or does it make it faster? Turns out it makes it faster by about 50%. So, fabulous. Also, it gets me moving, which I need to do. I injured my leg last fall, and never in my life have I valued the fact that I can walk quite so much as I do now. Okay, so I want to always be moving, and dictation's a huge part of that. So I'm looking at all those things, but I'm also studying my brain. Okay, there's a thing called diffuse mode thinking and focus mode thinking. I don't know if you guys have heard of these concepts before. Focus mode is when you like this brainstorming thing we're going to actually go through here in a minute. Where you're like trying to figure something out, and you're working on it, you got it all uploaded into your brain, and you're cranking. And you can do that for so long, and then your brain needs a rest, just like anything else. Go for a walk, take a shower, give your mental brain, or your mental processes a rest, and the ideas will flood in, because what you're doing, and I'm going to go all neuroscience on you for a second. Okay, so if you imagine your brain has a bunch of neurons in there, and they have little pathways, right? The pathways are it's your old self. All right? It's the habits that you have of thinking. I know I'll go put the thing in the Keurig, I make my tea, I go sit down. These are my comfort routines, comfort ways of thinking. When you burn in those pathways and you're working really hard to solve a problem, your brain is kind of locked into those pathways. It can only really think on the roads. It can't go off-road because you're focusing, you're trying too hard. If your answer to your problem is way off-road in the weeds, you can't access it, like literally can't access it because your brain is so dialed into the focus. Go and take a shower, go for a walk. Now you've opened up your mind, you're not on the pathways, you're wandering the weeds. It's like thinking about dinner and thinking about the kids' violin, thinking about God. Summer is, it's eating up all my time. All these things, and then all of a sudden, bam! Oh yeah, he's got to do that in the third act. Well, go back and write it down, because you've literally opened up your brain to not be on those narrow pathways. When you're in that relaxed diffuse mode, your brain can sort of assimilate all the information that's been fed into it. So you have to do the focus first. It's like uploading. all the information, then you sort of stand back and let the magic happen. Okay, and everything kind of whirls around and mixes and comes up with something fresh and new that you didn't have before. It's a neuroscience thing. It's like they've studied how brains work. It's like there's a course called Learning How to Learn. It talks about all this if you're interested in learning more about that. So I do stuff like that. I study how my brain works, and then I work my brain, work my process to try to do what works for me. So like that works for me. Dictation works for me. I think it's a great thing. I love for everybody to do it. Some people won't work for it. That's okay. You figure out your process. You don't need to know my process because it's irrelevant. What's relevant is what works for you. So please feel like that. Don't feel like you are doing it wrong ever because you're never doing it wrong. Okay? You might be suboptimal for what you would like, and if your performance or your reality is not matching up to your ambition, which is like 100% of my time, my reality is not matching up to my ambition, you know, work that process until you can close the gap a little bit, and you will get there. All right, great question.
I think it made me feel good because it's pretty much what I do. It's just try to really lock in it, and then I'm out on the front lawn raking leaves, and all of a sudden it just
Dumps right in, right?
yeah.
It's beautiful. Going to sleep, oh, I got another good story for you guys. Going to sleep is a great way, because like, you ever try to go to sleep, and your brain's like, bing, time to get up, go 5 in the morning, bing, oh, really? Yes, you have to get up and write that down. So, some of the great minds of our modern era, Picasso and Edison. So arts, science. They both had a very similar process for accessing that diffuse state. It's very interesting because it's very, very similar. They both sit in a chair, and you know they'd be working on a problem they couldn't solve. And they would take, one of them had marbles, the other one had keys. And they would sit in the chair, and they would like relax, and they would try to go to sleep. And as they pass out, they drop the thing, it wakes them up, and now they've accessed that flow state, that diffuse state, and they would have the idea. And they would do this as a regular habit. So that's the other thing, make it a habit. It's not just like a one-time thing. Understand that's how your brain works. Intentionally go after it and come up with a thing. So you don't get frustrated because it doesn't work. It's just all it means, you gotta go for a walk. It's just great for your health. Okay, any other questions before we do brainstorm?
Are you at any point are you going to talk about like at the dictation part?
Okay, let's skip to the very back page for
Because
1
you're going to
second.
cover that again. I mean, you could just wait till you get there. I just want to make sure at some point you're going to talk about it.
I'm actually not planning on talking about it, but how about if we have time, I'll go into it a little
Perfect.
bit.
I just want to know if you use an app or like what you use.
I have, the last page has a bunch of links and information, so make sure you look there if we don't get there.
Okay.
Okay, and one of those things there, I have another Facebook group for dictation, 500 and something odd people in there, great information. All writers learning how to dictate. Okay, brainstorming. This is actually a exercise that I got from my screenwriting class that I took with Kat Falls down in Northwestern University. She works in Northwestern University. I was actually in the Story Studio, which is in downtown Chicago. If you're ever looking for a local class to take that's writing oriented, check out their curriculum. She's amazing. If you ever have a class that you can take with her, take it, because she's just so good. So this is from her class, and when you've got all of this structure, you've got to fill it with some plot. You've got to have walls and bathrooms and kitchens and bad guys and allies and all kinds of stuff in there. So how do you generate that stuff? And more importantly, how do you generate it so that your story is super compelling? Because we don't want boring stories. We want gun stories, right? So how can you generate that content? This technique is amazing. I use it all the time. So grab a friend, because it actually works with two brains, even better. And then you can switch, you know, which one's the lead and which one's the follow. Get a Word document, a piece of paper, it doesn't matter. You're just going to write things down. Write a log line for your story. My character is a boy who wants to be a machine. That's it. That's all you really need to do is have a character, conflict, some idea of the story, background, like a setting. Just the basics. Okay, because so if you only have a little bit of story idea, That's okay. You can just start with that. Some basic stuff. Then what you want to do is brainstorm cool situations that character can get into in that world. And if you have a hard time thinking of it, just go crazy. Like come up with a thing that would totally be insane, like stuffed animals take over his body. Now he can't be a robot anymore. Okay. Aliens come into the story. What? There's no aliens in this story. Well, now there is. All right. Crazier the better, because all you're doing is brainstorming. Put it down. Once you've generated 15, 20, 30 ideas, doesn't matter how crazier the better, put an asterisk next to the ones that are the most intense. His best friend betrays him. His girlfriend sleeps with another guy. His mother dies. The robots decide to take him and make them one of his. Come up with these things that you're like, whoa, all of a sudden your brain is going bing, 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 because that would be a cool scene. Put an asterisk by them. Then put them in order. Which ones are most intense? Probably his mother dying is worse than his friend lying to him about the party. Okay, so put them in order. And then you want to structure your story, not straight line from least intense to most intense. That's actually not how it works at all. You want to have these 5 points. The hook, which is our setup. Remember from our structure in the beginning. The point of no return, which is our break into Act 2. The midpoint. The midpoint is so important. The crisis, which is our break into Act 3 when we come up with a new plan. And then the climax for the story. So those 5 power points in your story, you want to nail those down. And you want to make it so that your most intense scene in the story is at the end. Makes sense, right? Your second most intense scene, the beginning. Alright? So you're bookending your story with you hook people in with this radically intense scene, people die. I volunteer as tribute. Right? Holy crap. Alright, she's basically signed her death warrant in the first chapter. Okay. That's pretty intense. The third is the midpoint. Midpoint is really, really important. So you've got sort of like this inverted tent a little bit. Most intense, second, third, and then those 2 in-between points are your 4 and your 5. You can switch them around, whatever, but they're critical points of decision making. The first one, you're making that commitment. The second one, you've got a new plan, also a commitment. They're called doors of no return. You're passing through that threshold, and you can't go back. So you need to have something intense that happens in that time period. So if you do nothing else but brainstorm those 5 things out of your list of craziness, and your brain will go there. And if it doesn't, go for a walk, come back. You'll have your fun. Do that, and you will have the walls for your story before you ever write a single word. And who cares if they change, okay? Because you got walls. And now if instead of his girlfriend betraying him at the midpoint, maybe it's his guy friend, or maybe it's his mom dying at that point, but you have an idea, you have a sense that that has to be a really intense moment that is just short of how we started and how we end, okay? And those guiding lights can get you a story that people are just going to be like, please give me more. I love that. All right, that's all the official, gritty, fun stuff. Who has any question about that before we go into minutia and different things?
I'm not entirely sure I know how to word this, but since you are such a prolific writer, how do you, especially because you have sci-fi and I write fantasy, I find a lot of times I struggle with the actual world building and how to do it quickly enough so that you can get to the writing. And do you have any suggestions of shortcuts or something?
Okay, no shortcuts ever. Sorry. I know, right? I mean, it would be so awesome if you could just go over there. The art is in the struggle. All that struggle that you're doing, you're like, God, why can't this be easier? That is your art. Channel that into your thing and make that energy flow into it. It's really hard, okay, because it's struggle, and we don't like struggle, and it's uncomfortable. But all that brain juice that you're expending to come up with that really cool elven character or whatever you have, why does the Dark Tower exist? I don't know. Let's come up with a reason, and make it make sense. All that work is worthwhile. You'll never waste any of that, so don't be afraid of that. Secondly, don't be afraid to suffer. There should be joy in there too. Hopefully you're having joy with this because you love fantasy, right? And you really want to dream up the coolest world ever. So take your shackles off, go crazy, come up with a crazy ass thing that shouldn't be in any fantasy novel, but it's in yours because we have intelligent dolphins and that's just how it is. All right? Go for it. Don't hold yourself back because, oh my God, do we do that? Well, if I write something super sexy when all I've done is YA before, people are going to think I'm some kind of twisted pervert person. Don't hold yourself back. That's the worst thing you can do. If you're afraid of it, if it's hard, it's like a beacon that's saying, go here. Here's where the good stuff is. So go after it like the gift that it is. Secondly, don't be afraid to start writing, even though you don't know what you're writing. Like, it was the book I was going to tell you about. Stephen Pressfield. Anybody ever heard of him?
Oh, yes.
War of Art. Beautiful book.
I haven't gotten it. I want to. Did you read the Legend of Bagger Vance that he wrote?
I haven't read any of his fiction, just his nonfiction.
Oh my God, you have to read that.
How do you spell his last name?
Pressfield.
Okay, gotcha.
Just like they said.
Okay.
The War of Art talks about resistance as a force in the universe that's trying to stop you from doing your soul-fulfilling work. The work you are meant to do because you are this amazingly unique person on the planet, okay, with your unique perspective. And there's some work that only you can do, and resistance is going to try to do everything it can to stop you, including making you frustrated, all right? So discovering your joy in that, in the midst of the frustration, is part of battling resistance. And he had a great quote in this other book. He's got several books out on that topic. It says, begin before you're ready. So don't get ready and then begin. Begin before you're ready, and the work will show you what needs to be done. So just dive in there, make it happen, make it messy. You can always fix it later. That ain't no thing, right? Thank God for word processing. Can you imagine? Right? Typewriters? I don't even know how people wrote back then. I seriously don't. So you can always fix it and dig down, and you will, and you'll make it better, and it'll be great. But don't go, well, I don't know how the world is going to be. My son is a novelist as well. He's publishing his first self-published professional novel this fall. And he wrote a blog post that he just gave to me to proofread that's going to go out to one of my friends. And he talks in there about world building, actually. I might forward it to you. If you email me, I'll send it to you. He's a brilliant guy, my son is. Not that I'm biased at all. But he was talking about how there are 3 different ways to go through world building, and one of them is a sort of an exploratory walk your character through the world. All of a sudden he's got to brush his teeth. Well, how did they come up with water? Indoor plumbing. Do we have indoor plumbing in this world? How does that work exactly? Is it magical? Is it like a whole string of elves that are pumping it in? How does that work? And so sort of an exploratory world building is very natural, and it unlocks you. So you can just start writing. And you can just put a note in here. Insert plumbing later. Right? And you can come back to that on revisions so it doesn't slow you down. If you can't come up with something in the moment, which I often do. I'm like, oh, we need to speak dragon tongue here because he's going to curse, and it's not going to be like, F you. It's going to be like dragon cursing. So now we have to invent a language. Awesome. I'm just going to make something up. Throw it in there. Sounds good. Kind of Egyptian. I don't know. And carry on. Maybe I'll come back and fix it on revisions. Maybe not. I actually trust my intuitive, I'll just make something up impulse. Usually comes up with great stuff that it's like, where did that come from? But it's actually kind of awesome. So trust yourself to get there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You get a book, because that was an awesome question. Let's see, dark and sexy or YA?
YA.
Okay. Let's see. No fantasy stuff in there, sorry.
That's alright. Thank you.
Okay, Any other questions before we do the wrap up stuff? No. Okay. You guys are great. All right. Helpful stuff, links in the back. My dragon dictation. So it took me about a month to figure out how to dictate at all. Like, to have words come out of my mouth that looked anything like what I could do with my fingers. Right? So awkward. So uncomfortable. It was a struggle. And so I'm like, this is awesome. I am struggling. I know I'm doing something great here because I'm hard as crap. I don't like it, so it must be good. So I persevered through that. And it took me a full 6 months, I would say, to get to the point where I could actually dictate even reasonably close to the kind of prose that I like to put down in a first draft. I was dictating yesterday, and Dragon was dragon dictation software. There's a lot of dragons in my life. Dragon was pissing me off because it wasn't hearing my words the right way. It's probably like good because I was slurring. But the edits were all on Dragon's part. It wasn't on my part. I'm like, I got it wrong. It takes a long time to get there. I probably wrote, well, I did. I wrote 8 books with Dragon before I got to the point where that was comfortable. But I tell you, it is the best thing ever. And I really advocate for it. If you want to be and I'm a full-time writer. Okay, if you're a part-time writer, maybe not so critical for you. And if you don't have any health issues that are pushing you into it. But eventually, you want to be a full-time writer. And eventually, you're going to write a lot of words. And every word that you're sitting there, it's taking a toll on your body. The modern disease is sitting in a chair. All right, so if you can unleash yourself from the chair, you're really doing yourself, it's an investment in your career as a writer. So I highly encourage you to at least try it, or consider it, or keep it in your mind and bookmark my thing when you're ready. And every problem that's going through your head where you're like, no way, this is not working for me, no way. Every single one of those is in this group. Somebody has conquered that and felt it.
So is it kind of like how Siri, do you have to say like period, new paragraph,
Yes.
begin quote, comma, end quote? Like,
Open quote, she's, let's go to the store, comma, close quote, she said, period. Open quote. It'll be great there, period, close quote. New line, open quote.
It doesn't distract you from the story?
I mean, I'm good at it with Siri because you have to put down the punctuation and so forth.
Everybody's convinced that the punctuation is the hard part. It's like the easy part.
Right. Because you think in that terms. You think period, but
Yeah, that comes
But you
very
don't have to say
natural.
like capital T. I mean, like it just automatically knows it's the beginning like.
For the most part, I mean, Dragon has its issues, but it does put a space in where a space needs to be, and it does a lot of auto stuff. That's the easy part. The hard part is coming up with the words that sound like you when you write. The best part is dialogue. Dialogue gets very natural because you're speaking it. So do actions, because I'm like walking around and acting out the story. I'll do like slow motion fight scenes in my living room. Postman thinks I'm crazy. So yeah, I mean, you get there eventually. Some parts are easier than others. Everybody has those same issues. Everybody feels awkward.
Is it on a Word document though, or does it do something and then you have to copy and edit and then put it on your Word document?
My best process is you have to work on your system for your best process. I open what's called Dragon Pad, which is sort of like a text editor, and I dictate into that because it's a very low resource intensive word processing program. And Dragon is very hungry. It wants lots of CPU to translate your words into words. So I use the low resource one, and then I copy and paste that into Word and format it up nicely, which takes a minute. So
it's called Dragon Pad. It's like an app or
a? Dragon Dictate is the software. There's really only one. It's the market leader. It's what you want to use. The PC version is better than the Mac version. If all you have is Mac, you can make it work. People do make it work. Go look in the group. For microphones are hugely important for quality. Quality is hugely important for getting accuracy. So you want to have the right equipment set up. You want to test it out. But you can do it. It's not hard. People do it all the time. So, any more questions for Dragon?
I was going to say, I think Google Docs also you can.
You can, and in fact, the background software that runs the voice thing is, I don't know if you guys know who Ray Kurzweil is.
Yeah.
He's a Google guy, and he did a lot of,
He did it primarily for kids with disabilities.
Yes.
That was the whole thing,
Yes.
and it originally came out as Dragon Naturally Speaking,
exactly,
mostly for autistic kids.
which is awesome, and Ray's a good guy.
So
But
an
then
awesome guy.
Then it got propagated into all these other products, and it just recently got incorporated into Google. So if you were used to using Google before, Google Voice is not so good, but now it is because it's fully incorporated the new stuff. Still not as good as Dragon. It's worth look for it to go on sale for $99. Totally worth the money. You'll spend $50 to $100 max on a good headset. I have a headset that's wireless so I can walk. Some people like to have a mic. You may have the equipment already in your home to make it work. Dragon comes with a little dinky headset that's like crap. Don't use that. But yeah, you can try it, but I would still go with Dragon. People, there's stuff. I'm using a thing right now to record, and I'm going to use a transcription to upload it and transcribe it with Dragon. This is probably not going to work very well because I'm not using a good mic. So your equipment is really important. The software is really important. Otherwise, you spend all your time editing Dragon errors and not your own pros.
So it's a wireless headset that has a little microphone?
Yeah, like it's actually my kid's gamer headset. I'm like, oh, can I use that? It's like, buy me a new one. All right. So yeah, you don't have to have super fancy equipment. Most stuff will do it. And you had a question?
I was just gonna say, just to keep the flow going, you could put in the punctuation, type in the punctuation later.
You could, but like I said, that's actually the easy part.
Really?
It really is. Nobody believes me, but it's true. And you'll go to the group
Maybe
and
because
ask.
it just comes automatic.
It does. It becomes automatic, and it's just like typing. How long did it take you to learn how to type? The stories were already in your head. You knew what you wanted to say, but then you had to figure out how to do that finger thing to make it come out on the page. And then after a while, it was just like, you don't think about the periods when you're typing, right? It just flows out. It's the same thing with speaking. People don't believe me, but I promise you, that's not the hard part. The hard part is coming up with that artful phrase that describes the scenery. You're like, rah, 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 rah. It's big and it's black and I don't like it. It's like midnight.
Can you say like erase last line, or then do you just like say you came up with a clunker line, do you just say another?
I go, it's like midnight. No, it's like tar. It's like the tarriest black midnight of all midnights. And I just whoosh, go through it, and then when I come back and edit, I'm like, okay, we're gonna keep that one and this one, and
so you didn't see that there'd be a bunch like where you're just sort of rambling and you weren't sure.
Yes.
Okay.
And when you sneeze or cough, what?
It actually doesn't do that, but God help you if your mother calls and you forget to turn the mic on. That's a little embarrassing. Yeah, no, it's pretty smart software.
Did it like speed up your word count?
About 50%. Wow. Yes. Now that's total end to end because like the rough draft is probably 4 times as fast. Like I can type 1,000 words an hour at best. Story generation and typing. I can dictate 4,000 if I'm really on a roll. Usually more like 2 to 3. I could do a good solid chapter in an hour of dictating. So, which is really, and I have to take a break after that because of like pacing for an hour and talking story. I'm like, I need a break. So, but yeah, it does. Then you have to go back and edit, and then I actually have to put in another. Talk about process. I have to put in another edit level in that to catch typos because it has homophones. It drops words. So there's little errors that you don't normally put in typing, but they will be there in dictation, and so that it needs another pass. Even with all of that, it's faster. So, and I'm all about that speed. All right. Any other Dragon questions? What else do we have on here? Scrivener. Who all uses Scrivener? Excellent. They just came out with a new one for the pad. Scrivener is an organizational tool for those of you that don't know. And some people use it to write. They write their chapters in there. I don't use it for writing. I use it to organize my marketing and my research. So I actually developed for my 9-book Dragon thing, I developed a template that has character sheets and world building sheets and plot, all kinds of stuff in there that is just a template for me to use in, this is the first time I've been this organized, so of course I had to share it. So I put it in my group, my For Love or Money group. I shared the template. So you can go there, and that's what that link is, I believe. You can go download the story planner if you're a Scrivener user, or download Scrivener if you haven't used it. It's one of those things that looks super complicated, and it is, and you only need to use 10% of it to really get the use out of it. And the use is that you have basically a tree structure where you can put your prose, your links, your images, anything that you're using to track your story, research your story, you can shove in this one file. And it's all nicely, well, if you're organized. It's not, for me, it's throw these things all over here, and it's kind of not so organized. That's why I have the template to keep things organized.
Does that help you remember, Bobby has blue eyes, John is 17, or whatever, so you don't change somewhere in the
You
story.
don't have a clunky Word doc character sheet, you have a nice little scrivener.
Yeah, I'm not sure how not clunky it is, but it's definitely more organized.
All together.
Because it's all together. I've got character 1, character 2, character 3, all of the characters, folder, and then I've got, the world building cave, the cave, the house, the lair, the whatever, and it's just, it's great because you can put anything in there. You can put images in there. You can put links in there. You can put, I use it to brainstorm a lot.
Can you draw in Scrivener? Do you know,
maybe on the pad.
I just downloaded the app. I haven't had time to go through it, but I was wondering if you can draw on it too, because I draw out my maps.
I wouldn't be able to
but-
do it, but you might be able to. I wouldn't be
Okay.
surprised, especially because it's a Mac product.
Right.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would love to.
No, I haven't seen it. Okay. Maybe I'm looking at that. Because I use different apps for every little thing, and I was hoping I could use Scrivener for everything. So
You'd be able to use for most of it. Maybe, maybe. But that would be cool. Or you could draw it and then import it.
Right. Well, I'm always changing it though. So
Okay.
that's the problem.
Right. Yeah, you might want to just have a link in there to pull it up.
You can link.
Yeah, you can
okay,
link
cool.
to anything. I have all kinds of where I found stuff because I can put it in there, but I forget where I found it, and I might need more information, so I put the link in so I can go find it later. Let me know if it can do that. That would be awesome. Okay, we are almost done, people. Facing Your Fears in Indie Publishing. This is a video that one of our friends here just watched. It's
Very good.
Thank you. It's a 30-minute webinar about all the things you're afraid of and how to use creative action to overcome. And I don't even want to use the word overcome because the struggle is the art, right? So,
It's 8:37.
Yeah, so
oh, okay. Struggle's the art. Go do it. Go watch it. It's awesome. And finally, back page is a thing that I did last month on indie publishing. If you're interested, it's the whole PowerPoint is online, so you can download it. Thank you so much for all of your attention.
thank you.
Thanks so much for listening, and I hope that this presentation will help you tell better stories. You can find out any more information that you might like at www.susankquinn.com. Journey well, my friends.